I didn't know how to drive, but that didn't stop me from taking his Chevy Impala to impress a girl. I was 13 years old, 7th grade, and I was absolutely, completely, stupidly in love with this girl named Susan Martinez, who lived 3 blocks away. I still can't believe I did this, and I still can't believe what happened after. Back then, things were different. Nobody monitored you. Your parents didn't know where you were half the time. There were no cell phones, no GPS, no way for them to track you down if you disappeared. So when I decided I was going to take my dad's car, it seemed like it might actually work. My reasoning was this. Susan was impressed by older guys who could drive, guys who had cars. I was 13, and I couldn't do either of those things. But my dad had a 1968 Chevy Impala, gorgeous car, blue with a black interior, chrome everywhere. It was his pride and joy. He'd spend Saturday mornings washing it, waxing it, making sure every detail was perfect, and I was going to steal it. I remember the day I decided to do it. It was a Saturday afternoon. My dad was at the garage getting something. My mom was inside the house, and the keys were hanging on a hook by the back door like they always were. I'd watched my dad drive enough times to think I understood the basics. Turn the key, press the gas, turn the wheel. How hard could it be? Spoiler alert. Very hard. I got in that car, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. I remember the engine turning over, and this surge of adrenaline and terror running through me. I was actually doing this. I was actually stealing my father's car. I managed to back it out of the driveway without hitting anything, which felt like a miracle. The problem was, I'd never actually driven on the street before. I'd never had to deal with other cars, or intersections, or the fact that you have to actually steer while you're moving. The first block was okay. I was going maybe 5 miles per hour, both hands gripping the wheel like my life depended on it. I was sweating through my shirt. Every car I saw coming toward me felt like a cop. Every person on the sidewalk felt like they were definitely calling the police to report a 13-year-old in a Chevy Impala. Susan's house was 3 blocks away. I'd mapped it out in my head. Left at the stop sign, right on Elm Street, then down to her house. Simple. Except my depth perception was terrible, and I nearly sideswiped a parked car making that first left turn. I remember hearing the screech of tires, not mine, but another car slamming on the brakes because I'd basically pulled out in front of them. The driver honked. I panicked. I pressed what I thought was the gas pedal, but was actually the brake, and the car lurched to a stop so suddenly I thought I'd broken something. For a minute, I just sat there. Just sat in that car, hands shaking, thinking about turning around and going home. This was insane. This was the dumbest idea I'd ever had. I was going to get caught. I was going to crash my dad's car. I was going to die. But then I thought about Susan, about how impressed she'd be if I pulled up in this beautiful car, about how cool I'd look. And I pressed the gas pedal again and kept going. The second block went better. I was getting more confident, maybe too confident. I actually took my hands off the wheel for like 2 seconds, which was monumentally stupid, but also made me feel like I was actually driving instead of just barely controlling a death machine. By the time I got to Elm Street, I felt like I was a real driver. I wasn't. I was still a terrified 13-year-old in a car I'd never actually driven before. But I felt like it, and that's what mattered. Susan's house was at the end of the block. I could see it. And I could see Susan in her front yard, watering the garden with her mom. Perfect. She was going to see me pull up in this incredible car, and she was going to think I was the coolest guy who'd ever lived. I started slowing down as I approached. I was going to do a smooth, casual pull-up to the curb in front of her house. Very cool, very nonchalant. Like this was totally normal for me, driving around in my dad's Impala on a Saturday afternoon. What I didn't account for was the fact that I didn't actually know how to brake properly. I pressed the brake pedal, and instead of slowing down smoothly, the car lurched to a stop so suddenly that if I'd had a passenger, they probably would have gone through the windshield. The car stalled, just died right there in the middle of the street, about 20 feet from Susan's house. I could see her looking, could see her and her mom both staring at the car. And then, I'll never forget this, I saw the recognition cross her face. She recognized the car. She knew whose car it was. And then she saw me. Saw that it was me, not my dad, sitting behind the wheel. I sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably like 5 seconds, just making eye contact with Susan Martinez, while she stared at me with this expression that was somewhere between amused and horrified. Then her mom started walking toward the car. I panicked. I turned the key, the engine caught, and I just drove away. Drove as fast as I could, which at 13 years old, with no real driving experience, meant maybe 20 miles per hour, but felt like 100. I was shaking so bad I could barely steer. I made it back to my house somehow without crashing, without hitting anything, without getting pulled over. I pulled into the driveway, parked the car as close to where it had been as I could remember, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a solid 10 minutes, trying to remember how to breathe. When I finally got out of the car, my legs were like jelly. I walked inside expecting to immediately get caught, to immediately have to face my dad, to immediately get the belt or whatever punishment was coming to me. But nobody said anything. My mom was in the kitchen. She asked if I wanted a snack. That was it. I went to my room and waited to die. My dad came home maybe an hour later. I heard his car pull into the driveway. I heard him get out. I waited for him to come inside and scream at me, to ask me why his car had been moved, to demand an explanation. He never came upstairs. About an hour later, my mom called me down for dinner, and my dad was sitting at the table, eating pot roast like nothing had happened. I sat down, completely confused, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It never did. We ate dinner. Nobody said anything about the car. Nobody asked where I'd been or what I'd been doing. My dad didn't mention it. My mom didn't mention it. It was like the whole thing had never happened. For 3 days I waited. I thought they were just building suspense, that they were going to let me stew in my own guilt before they punished me. But on the 4th day I realized they knew. They had to know. But they weren't going to say anything about it. Years later, after I was grown up with kids of my own, I asked my dad about it. I said, "Dad, remember when I took your car when I was 13? And he just smiled. He said, "Yeah, I saw you leave. I was in the driveway. I saw you trying to figure out how to back out of there." "Why didn't you stop me?" I asked. He thought about it for a minute. Then he said, "Because you had to learn. And you did learn. You learned it was dumb. And you learned it was scary. And you learned you weren't ready. I didn't need to punish you. You punished yourself. That's worth more than anything I could have done." I was stunned. I asked him if he was angry about the car. "Was I?" he said. "Yeah, a little. But you didn't hit anything. You got it back in one piece. And you never did it again, did you?" I hadn't. I'd learned my lesson that day, sitting in front of Susan Martinez's house, realizing that being cool wasn't worth the terror and stupidity of that moment. My dad never even told my mom that he knew. He just let the whole thing go. Let me live with the guilt and the fear and the knowledge that I'd gotten away with something but learned not to do it again. These days, people would call that bad parenting. They'd say he should have punished me, lectured me, made me understand the seriousness of what I'd done. And maybe they're right, but I'll tell you what. I never stole another car. I never did anything that reckless again. Because I learned the hard way that actions have consequences, and I didn't need my dad to spell it out for me. I also never impressed Susan Martinez, if you're wondering. She told people about the 13-year-old who stole his dad's car and nearly crashed it on her street. It became this legendary story at school. But it made me a legend for all the wrong reasons, and I learned pretty quick that impressing girls with stupid decisions is not the way to go. My dad passed away about 15 years ago, and I've thought about that conversation a lot since then. About how he trusted me even when I was untrustworthy. How he let me fail and learn on my own instead of forcing the lesson down my throat. That's not how parenting works anymore. Kids get supervised constantly. They get lectured and punished and monitored. And maybe that's safer. But I wonder if they learn the same way. If they understand consequences the way I did. Sitting in that car, realizing I'd been stupid and scared and lucky. I took my dad's car at 13 because I was an idiot. But I never did it again because I was an idiot who learned. And that's the whole story, really. Sometimes you have to let people make their mistakes. Sometimes that's the only way they actually learn.